Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here and I'm back again with a brand new video. Before I begin, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoy my videos, make sure you leave a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. So with that being said, I've spent 48 hours with the brand new 2025 Moto Razr. And this is their entry level to flip devices here in 2025. And actually this is the third generation of those entry level flip phones. And basically, here's what I have to say. They've made some welcome refinements to improve upon the previous generation, but is it really enough for you to change from the second gen Moto Razr to the third gen 2025 Moto Razr? Maybe, maybe not. So basically from a design perspective, it still follows the same formula from the previous generation. So it still has a dual display technology so that you have your front screen and you have your back screen, which is pretty much the same as the previous generation. What they did end up changing is going on to a different material choice. And so it does have this kind of texture-like material that almost feels like a strong fabric, but it's kind of hard to describe if you really don't get your hands on it. I would say it's slightly more slippery than the other kind of sandstone finish that they had on the previous generation, but in my opinion, I think it looks sharper, and especially with this blue color that follows this phone all the way around, it looks better. And on the right hand side, you do have your power button, volume up and down, and your microphone. And this, like I said, the blue follows the entire phone from the rails to the back of the device. So that's really good attention to detail. Now, I want to speak on the hinge design. So they did make some minor improvements that I think are worthwhile in my opinion. So the hinges definitely feels a little bit more solid than the previous generation. I don't know if they actually changed the design of it, but maybe weight distribution. They did something for sure. But yeah, overall though, the hinge is definitely a little bit more solid than the previous generation. And this phone nowadays comes with a better water resistant rating. So it does have IP48 and it's rated for up to 1.5 meter for 30 minutes. I still don't trust any phone with just a standard rating to survive water, but you do have it if you ever need it. In the front of the phone, you will find your 6.9-inch display. So it's a 1080p Super AMOLED display, and it's a large phone. Basically, it's a tall phone. I don't want to say it's a wide phone, so it's definitely a tall phone that has 84.9% screen to body ratio. It does support HDR10 Plus versus standard HDR10 from the previous generation. 3000 nits of high peak brightness, 120 Hz of refresh rate, and yeah, really don't have anything to complain about the display. If we were to look at the crease, I feel like year after year they do a better job in hiding it. It's still going to be there, but it's a little bit more hidden. So it really didn't bother me at all while using this phone. Maybe in the future, as you fold it over 100 times or 200 times, you'll see it. It'll become more apparent. But as of right now, not really have an issue with that. And there's these kind of rails around the display, so the display is not really flat. That actually gives it a more protection. So if you do drop it while the phone is laying flat, it will try to protect the display basically. And from a perspective of watching videos, consuming social media, pretty much anything that you will do on this phone's display, you will enjoy. I really, like I said, especially when watching videos, I didn't really notice the crease. So one point that I still want to bring up is that you have to also remind yourself that this display at least is still made out of plastic material, so it will scratch sooner or later. So try yourself to kind of protect it to the best of your ability if you do end up getting this phone. But overall though, it's definitely a minor step up from the previous generation from the display department, and I definitely like it. Now if we look at the secondary display, it also received some minor updates. So it's a 3.6-inch 1066 by 1056 that does have a 1413 ppi, and it does have Gorilla Glass Victus, which is supposed to be more protective if you do drop it. Reaches 1700 nits. It does have HDR10 and 90 Hz refresh rate. It still is an OLED display, and you can do a lot of things with this secondary display. At first, I did think that you can't really make calls, but I've seen people actually make calls with this secondary display. And you can go as far as using the camera as your viewfinder, messaging app. You can go through your pictures, and you can even use Gemini, which we will talk about AI about this phone later on. And so you can do a lot of things with this secondary display. It's a little bit cleaner than the Galaxy Z Flip 6's secondary display, if you ask me, but we'll save that for another day. And like I said, this secondary display is really good. One of the things that I like about it is that I can actually take pictures and go through my Photos app and go and browse through the pictures. And the possibilities with the second display is just limitless. So definitely a thumbs up from Motorola. It's not a huge improvement from the previous generation, but slightly refined. Speaking of this kind of photos and going through pictures, let's have a conversation about this camera. They use the same camera from the previous generation, so you still get a dual camera setup with a 50 megapixel main sensor at f1.7 aperture, a 13 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide up to 120-degree field of view, and the main sensor does have optical image stabilization, and the HDR pictures that come out of this phone are actually really bright, and it also supports 4K at 30 or 1080p at 30, 60 or 120 frames per second, and the front-facing camera has a 32 megapixel f2.4. When it comes to taking pictures, I do have to say that one, the vibrating motor on this phone throughout the device, not just when taking pictures, is way better than the previous generation. And switching between the main sensor and wide angle is almost instant. And it does have this kind of 2x telephoto, fake telephoto, I guess you could say. Most importantly, you can change a lot. It does have a pro mode, so you can mess with your parameters that way: white balance, exposure, ISO levels, and things like that. But I'm pretty sure most people are going to shoot in auto mode. And you can also use the secondary display, like I said, as your actual selfie camera instead of reverting to the selfie camera that this phone has. Now, as far as picture quality, I want to say that they've improved slightly. I guess the image processing is what's improved. So the pictures do come out bright, and under good lighting conditions, you'll really like the pictures that come out of this phone. Now, it does come out overly bright sometimes, and the ultra wide will have a considerable amount of loss of quality. The selfie camera is alright. The video capability on this phone is actually also pretty good. It may in some scenarios overexpose or underexpose, but for the most part it still tries its best to keep this kind of saturated look that this phone has. So definitely thumbs up. So take a look at the video quality. Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here, and this is the video test of the brand new Moto Razr. So basically this is essentially the basic version of the Moto Razr, not the Razr Plus or the Razr Ultra, but I feel like it's doing a much better job year after year in improving the camera quality. If you're shooting at 1080p, you can switch between your main and your ultra wide simultaneously. You can go to the selfie camera, so you cannot really go to the selfie camera like you could on other Samsung devices, but yeah, so there's a noticeable loss in quality when you switch to the wide angle, and when you go back to the main sensor, a much more saturated, better quality look. So it's an improved version. This is at 1080p. If you move to 4K, it becomes much harder to switch between your main sensor and your ultra wide, so keep that in mind. And it's kind of windy, so I wonder how good the audio sounds like. So let's go ahead and speak on the performance of the 2025 Moto Razr, and they did improve again, not dramatically, but there are some refinements. So they used the new MediaTek Dimensity 7400X based on a 4nm. You get the Mali G615 MC2 for your GPU, 256GB of storage, and you also have out-the-box Android 15. And basically the idea behind this processor is not more so for performance. When I did my testing, it was like 5 to 6% faster than the previous generation, but mainly this processor is focused towards AI integration, which this phone now supports. So AI has been a big deal in smartphones lately, and that's just been the noise. Me personally, when it comes to your everyday tasks, this phone performs fine. So phone app, messaging app, anything that requires you to use the phone on a daily basis will be perfect on this phone. It works flawlessly, and I get that still out of the box, so who knows how it will be down the line. But as of right now, no real issues in the everyday performance. And obviously with the 8 gigs of RAM, it does a fantastic job in multitasking. And I did also do synthetic benchmark, and that's where I kind of brought up the fact that it didn't really improve that much in the performance department based on the previous generation. The battery life on here did improve. So the single core is 1082, the multi-core is 3062. And basically, I think the previous generation had slightly less single and slightly less multi-core scores. So realistically, other than AI, I don't think this processor really brought this phone to a next level performing device. Not it. So when it comes to the battery life, we did see improvements, not in the charging speed. So the charging speed of this phone is still 30 watts in wired and 15 watts in wireless, but a larger battery, 4500 milliamp hours, and the battery life on here is excellent. Didn't really have any issues with it. Even standby on here is good. So with that being said, when it came down to gaming, this phone also was good for the most part. Now, I didn't really test stupid graphics heavy games, but for the games that I tested, they were graphically, I don't want to say demanding, but they still needed some graphics power. And it worked fine. Didn't really have a lot of issues with it. I played the game for a little bit of time. Throttle on here still is very good, so it doesn't necessarily bring down the phone's performance after like a long period of time. So have they made enough improvements from the previous generation for you to justify paying the $699 price tag that this phone has? I don't think so. However, if you do have the first generation, I think this is a worthwhile upgrade if you're in the market for a flip device. I think this is a welcome improvement from the first generation. It's more refined, more complete, and it does support better water resistance, a HDR10 Plus support, a slightly better image processing, and a welcome improved battery life. So if you have the Motorola 2025 Razr, let me know. If you don't, what do you think about this phone? Is it worth your while? Is it worth your money? Let me know. I'm pretty sure the price of this phone will come down by $200 within the next coming months. So keep on the lookout. Thank you all so much for watching. More videos are coming soon.